Mark, so Donald Trump really confirming that Ayatollah Khamenei has been killed in this Operation Epic Fury.
Yes, talk about fast moving. That was how one British diplomat put it to me earlier on today. It certainly is fast moving. A head spinning day in the Middle East, a head spinning day for international diplomacy, geopolitics and confirmation in the last 15 minutes that the man who has been at the very top of the Iranian regime of the Islamic Republic for 37 years, Ali Khamenei, is dead. The supreme leader since 1989. Before that, he was the president of Iran from 1981 to 1989. And then for all those years, 37 years to today, he was the supreme leader, only the second ever supreme leader of the country since the revolution back in 1979. Confirmation from the President of the United States that he is dead. We have no further detail, indeed no proof that he is dead. And the Iranians, as recently as a couple of hours ago, those around the supreme leader, the spokesperson for the foreign ministry speaking to Sky News, were claiming that he was alive. Of course, they would do that up until the point at which it is confirmed that he has died. But on social media, the American president, as is his style, has now confirmed the rumours that had been raised by the Israelis. We heard Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel, a key part of the events of the course of the past 12 hours. He said that Khamenei was dead, and now confirmation by the Americans as well. I suppose it is so clear now. If there was an expectation that perhaps the Americans would make a small strike on Iran, perhaps to nudge the negotiations on, that is absolutely not what has unfolded over the past 12 hours or more. Instead, a massive series of strikes by the Americans and by the Israelis that have taken out the leadership right to the very top of Iran. And the question now is, what next? What replaces this? Well, in his statement on Truth Social, the American president suggested, hoped, called for the Iranian people themselves to align with the police force in America, to align with the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, and all of them to create a new future for their own country. Now, if that manages to come to pass, then, well, this truly consequential American president who loves a gamble, who loves to who loves to catch everyone off their stride, well, that gamble will have paid off. But we do not yet know whether that will be the case. And the other scenario is Trump's Afghanistan, Trump's Vietnam, Trump's Iraq, a scenario where regime change is instead regime collapse. And into that, into that vacuum, all the protagonists and all the countries surrounding are in one way or another drawn. So that much we don't yet know what happens next. There will be no desire by the American president to put troops on the ground. He will want this to be an operation that takes place from a distance. He will not want to be drawn into anything, which is why he is articulating his language there that you can see, making it clear that he wants the Iranians themselves to produce their own future, effectively. But very tense moments, I think, over the days ahead, without question.
Indeed. Mark, can you tell us a bit more about Operation Epic Fury? Because Donald Trump has said, I can go long and take over the whole thing or end it in 2 or 3 days. It will take Iran several years to recover from the US-Israeli strikes. What is the long game? Is there one? Or is the president hoping that this will be over in a matter of days?
Yeah, of course he's hoping it will be over in a matter of days. Look, what is the long game? What is the short game? What is Trump's game? We just don't know. I mean, it's a very Trumpian statement, isn't it? I can go long, I can keep this going for months and months, or I can call it a day in a couple of days. All his options are open. Some might say because he is deciding on his next move as he goes. That is very much Trump's style. Israel. Incidentally, he's in Mar-a-Lago. He's not even doing all this from the Situation Room in Washington, D.C. and the White House, as would be the normal style. So much of this is to a T Trump. It is so unorthodox. He's not in the Situation Room. He hasn't got congressional approval. He has not prepared the American people for this. You know, it was the State of the Union just last week. That was the perfect forum, the perfect moment where if he was to do this the normal way, he would have begun to prepare the American people. We need to do this for X, Y, and Z reasons. He didn't do that. It was over an hour into the State of the Union before he mentioned anything to do with foreign policy or Iran. Why? Well, because he likes the element of surprise and he doesn't feel he needs to use Congress or to get the approval of Congress. This is his show. This is the Trump show. He is doing it his way. He is doing it in a truly unorthodox way. As for the operation itself, well, overwhelming American and Israeli attacks right across Iran over the course of the early hours in Iran. It was sunrise before this attack began, which I think in itself is interesting. You would expect it to happen overnight. It didn't happen overnight, perhaps because they knew that at night time, when the Iranians would have been expecting the attack, the Ayatollah would have been deep underground. Maybe he was not at the point at which they struck. So we saw that, and then, as I'm sure you're going to go into, we saw the retaliation by the Iranians. Not overwhelming, it has to be said. Yes, inaccurate at times. Places across the Gulf Arab countries were hit, including hotels and all the rest of it, and of course in Israel as well, but perhaps not quite as sustained, certainly on Israel, as might have been expected. Now, is that because Iran does simply not have the capability now, or indeed the leadership, to be able to call the shots that would make up the retaliation? Or is it that Iran, underneath the leadership now decapitated, is playing a longer game, will want to draw America into this, will want to, hold back some of what they could throw at the American bases in the region or throw into Israel, hold that back to make this a longer game. Very hard to tell now. I think there will be a tendency, of course, to draw parallels with Iraq 2003. No game plan really for the day after. We all know the history, years and years of sectarian conflict. There will be a tendency and a desire to draw direct parallels. There aren't direct parallels. They're two very different countries. But it is still the case that if you don't have a plan for the day after, and there is no sense at the moment that the Americans do have a plan other than good luck to you, it's your country, make what you will of it. Other than that, there doesn't appear to be a plan. And if you don't have a plan, then regime change can become regime collapse. I was speaking to a European ambassador of a European nation based here in Washington last week, and we were talking about the prospect of Iran. And that ambassador said to me, be in no doubt, there is no day after plan. This is Trump's war. And Netanyahu's. They are making this up. They are calling the shots, but they do not have a plan other than, as I say, it's your country, Iranian people. You take it over and you work out what's next. So hugely tense days for sure. A massive gamble by a president who loves to take a gamble, who loves to catch everyone off guard. If it works, well, for America, for his base, it's the booyah moment, American power. If it doesn't work, this is Trump's Vietnam.
Mark, for the moment, thank you very much. Well, let's cross now for the very latest from Adam Parsons, who's in Jerusalem for us. Adam, we're hearing that there's celebrations in the streets of Tehran, according to the Reuters news agency. But where you are, there have been incoming missiles and constant alert sirens.
Yeah, as there have been in Tehran and across Iran, my understanding is at the moment there are American fighter jets over Israel conducting more airstrikes, over Iran, I should say, conducting more airstrikes over that country. The attacks have been done, of course, in concert with Israeli forces. In fact, earlier tonight, the Israeli Air Force sent about 200 planes into Iranian airspace. That was the biggest aerial assault that Israel has ever carried out. So yes, we have seen a series of missile interceptions over the course of today since this war broke out, and those haven't slowed down. In fact, this evening we've seen, I would imagine, sort of several dozen of these over the course of darkness. You see streaks of light in the sky, and that is the interception missile coming up from the ground and intercepting, some of them very, very high up, some of them lower, and then seeing debris that has fallen down to the ground here in Jerusalem. And that, of course, has been replicated across Israel and the region. So we've seen in Dubai and Bahrain, in Qatar. We have seen Iranian missiles that have hit targets there, a port and an American base in Bahrain, for instance, a hotel in Dubai. But the response hasn't been massive by Iran. By various sources that I've talked to have said that, yes, it's been substantial, but it hasn't been this kind of overwhelming show of force that they thought might be coming in the direction, particularly of Israel, particularly, I have to say, of Tel Aviv, which had been a nervous city. It had expected to be focused upon, targeted by an absolute barrage of missiles, raising the question of what is Iran's tactic. Well, one theory that had been put forward by some intelligence experts was that Iran was sort of delaying its response to try to convince America to reopen negotiations, to try to drag this out, and it felt that President Trump could lose momentum and want to reopen talks rather than persist for a final victory. If it is confirmed that Ayatollah Khamenei is dead, and certainly President Trump seems emphatic and certain in that belief, then that tactic has probably gone, because if that is correct, then Iran is now a country at war and with no leader. And of course, war is the very time when you need strong leadership, you need strong institutions. Well, Iran has institutions like the Republican Guard, but without guiding and leadership from the top, those institutions can begin to flounder. And let's make no mistake, Republican Guard is the glue that held together the regime, that still holds it together through intimidation and fear and through its network of secret information. If that were to fade away, the military generally is much less dogmatic in its support of the regime. And by common consent, the majority of Iranians do not support the Ayatollah, do not support this authoritarian regime, but have lived in fear. They are presently also living with terrible economic hardship, with lack of energy, and with resentment at seeing huge amounts of their money spent on nuclear programs that don't help them, and money being funneled to Hamas and Hezbollah and to the Houthis, pursuing the destruction of Israel, which is an aim that many in Iran think is simply a needless waste of money. So that is what the Americans and the Israelis will be hoping to tap into. But this is a profoundly uncertain time, as is shown by this evening when Iranian missiles are still being fired here into Israel, and Israeli and American military might is still being used to bomb Iran. I think even if Ayatollah Khamenei has been killed, and perhaps even more if he has been killed, this will be a volatile, difficult time for this region, and this war could still extend into the future and morph the politics, the policies, and the safety of so many people in the Middle East.
Indeed, Adam, thank you very much for the moment. Obviously, as Adam's saying there, it has repercussions across the region and the Middle East at large. You are watching The Wrap. With me tonight, journalist and author Christina Patterson and Jasmine El-Gamal, a political analyst and former Middle East advisor at the US Department of Defense, and also our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn. Dom, I'm going to come to you first of all. The big question now is, What next?
Yeah, and I think, we have to be cautious, don't we? Because information in wars is used as a weapon, and there's a lot of briefing going on, particularly in America, and it's just very hard to work out how much of it is true, and we'll have to wait just for time to sort of bear out what we're being told. But what we are being told at the moment, through various briefings to the American and the Israeli military, is that what happened this morning was not just the start of an air campaign, but a particularly effective decapitation operation, which, according to various accounts, targeted not just the Ayatollah, but also various key commanders, including some of the figures he's potentially appointed as successors, in a bunker in the compound that he lived in Tehran, but not a deep enough bunker to be able to withstand the blast of what may have been a 30-ton bomb dropped on him, rather like what happened to Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah leader. Now, if that is the case, then it's not just the Ayatollah who has been killed, and we don't have any confirmation yet that he's been killed, but it's also sort of the top level of his command, potentially. Now, if he is dead, then it looks like it's not just the death of the Ayatollah, but also the death of the Iranian revolution, which was effectively on life support. This revolution began in 1979. It was a massive earthquake for the region and for the world. It was, people have described the Ayatollah, both the Ayatollah and the one before him, as an extraordinary figure, sort of part pope, part religious leader, part general, part revolutionary leader, part sort of tyrannical autocrat. And both Ayatollahs sort of played that role. Very, very powerful figure. But the Iranian Revolution was an earthquake that just totally overturned the region. It put a theocratic Islamist, movement into power, and they used that power to revolutionise the region, but also tried to export their region beyond their borders. It's been on life support because it has failed ideologically, it has failed economically. It's also completely failed what its sort of fundamental tenet, one of its fundamental tenets, was that it would protect the Iranians by having this sort of ring of defence around it, using proxies, and those have been dismantled over the last year by their Israeli enemies. It has been the focus of now several years of on-off protests. When I was there most recently, one person who was sort of supplied to us by the government as a kind of minder, he said, you must understand that the young people here, they just say F you to the corrupt old men. Just get out of our lives. Your time has gone. It's come and gone. Your revolution is over. We just want to live like normal people. And, tens of thousands of Iranians have taken to the streets in recent months again to try and topple this regime or protest against it. And the regime has gone out and shot them in their thousands, just sending out police and officers and soldiers to shoot them dead with live ammunition. So if he is dead, you have to wonder who's going to step forward to try and replace him, given what has happened to him and what justice has been meted out to him by his enemies. And what are the Iranian people going to tolerate as a replacement? I mean, as Adam was saying there, we're entering very uncertain territory. I think it's fair to say that if he is dead, that the revolution is effectively dead too. It's just very hard to work out what happens next, because Iran is a huge, complex, complicated country. And wars never go to plan. And I don't think it's clear the Israelis or the Americans have a plan for the day after either, which is a crucial kind of flaw, potentially, in their strategy.
Jasmine, we've heard the reports of people on the streets of Tehran out celebrating this evening. And we know that the regime has been weakened following on from those protests that Dominic was talking about. What do you think is the next step for the people? Because they've had this call from Donald Trump to come out and take over the government. Are they going to heed that call, or will they be fearful that they'll be killed in the streets again?
Well, I think that's a very difficult question to answer. I mean, it's really impossible to know in the uncertainty that you just mentioned what people are going to do. It is, before we go into, the legality of these strikes and the implications moving forward, it is really important to think about the victims of Ayatollah Khamenei and Khamenei, both of them, and what they did to people in the region, not just Iranians, Syrians, Lebanese, Palestinians, Yemenis, everywhere that they had proxies, that they tried to spread this revolution in the most destructive of ways, people suffered. So this is certainly, not many people are going to be mourning the loss of this man or the system that he represented. That said, we don't really know what's going on, because this scenario in itself, so if the uncertainty was around whether Trump would strike or not, it was more certain what would happen once he decided to strike. That part was more certain. I previewed this last week with some of your colleagues, that it was fairly predictable that the U.S., if they decided to go in at this time, given how weak the regime is, that they would go in and completely decapitate the top leadership and rob Iran of as much retaliatory capacity as they could, both offensive capabilities and defensive capabilities. So this was entirely predictable, and not just to us as analysts. The Iranian regime, the top officials and the ones working for them were probably planning for this as well, not just now, but for months, for years. So you have to think there is a plan. Whether that plan remains in place or whether the remaining leadership or the remaining apparatus is so shaken and so concerned for their own lives that they decide to do essentially what the Venezuelan regime did, which was say, okay, you've got your top guy. We would like to stay. We would like to keep our lives. What do you need from us? And then you start to talk about potential transformations of the regime rather than complete decapitation of the entire system itself.
Christina, we read that the Israelis were the months in the planning with America for this Operation Epic Fury. But the timing does seem odd in that negotiations were ongoing. Yeah. And as the Iranians have said, you know, why hit when we're talking and very close to a diplomatic resolution?
Midterms, polls not going well for Donald Trump. Always good to have a war if you're worried about your polling. I mean, who knows? But I can't help thinking Trump is a whimsical creature, and he's changed his mind on the Chagos Islands about 5 times in the last few months. I don't believe that he has had a strategy for Iran. I don't believe he cares very much about regime change. I felt that I've been to Iran. I love Iran. I have Iranian friends. The people are highly educated. Many people do hate the government. They're also, I mean, the mad thing is you go there, you have to cover your head, obviously fantastically strict and ostensibly Islamic regime, but it's not an Islamic regime. At the time I went, which was 2008, I don't know if this has changed, but I doubt it's changed in favour of the Islamic regime, so-called. About 4% of the population went regularly to Friday prayers. 4%. That is not a fundamentalist country. It's not a country based on an ideology. It's a country living under a dictatorship. And I felt, when we saw those young people being slaughtered on the streets in their thousands, maybe 10,000, maybe more, having their eyes shot out, having their genitals shot out, being targeted and murdered and massacred, I felt absolutely furious for the armchair commentators begging them to go on the streets, just as I felt furious when I saw Trump's video saying, oh, we'd love you to go on the streets, we're not going to do anything. You know, Israel, this is Netanyahu's wet dream to go and do this. He's been planning it for years. He needs a permanent war. And, of course, it is an existential... Iran has been theoretically, Iran has been an existential threat to Israel because it has its proxies. But no one can match Israel for firepower, and with its Iron Dome, it's very well defended. So I don't believe for one moment that Iran was planning to attack America, as Trump announced in his statement. What a nonsensical assertion. Does Trump care whether his proxies are doing bits and bobs around the Middle East? Not really. Trump cares about himself. He even had the absolute nerve in that speech to say, I'm the president who is giving you this once-in-a-generation chance for freedom. I found that deeply, deeply offensive. People have already died. If the reports are right, primary school children, maybe even 80 primary school children have been murdered because of this decision. How Trump can sleep at night knowing that, with no plan for the day after, just as we saw this in Iraq. And I actually wrongly supported the Iraq war when it happened initially, and I soon saw that I was wrong. But when you read about the planning that went into it, i.e. none at all, or read books like, whatever it was, Imperial, there was a book, various books about what happened in Iraq after the war, with 22-year-olds writing on the back of an envelope what the plan was, and hundreds of thousands of people killed. I just find it desperately upsetting. The instability throughout the Middle East now, no one knows what will happen. It's shocking.
Dominic, the president saying, actually, we're just going to turn and go to New York, the UN Security Council, because the UK representative is speaking.
The Iranian regime has murdered thousands of its own people simply for exercising their fundamental rights and freedoms. Iran has repeatedly ignored calls to find a durable and acceptable solution to the nuclear issue, while continuing to destabilize the region through its support to proxies and partners. We strongly condemn Iranian strikes across the region, including the attacks on a hotel in Dubai, the attack on Kuwait's civilian airport, and attacks on civilian targets in Bahrain. We extend our support and solidarity to all our partners, many of which are not parties to the conflict. Regional stability remains a priority. As my Prime Minister stated, UK forces are active and British planes are in the sky today as part of coordinated regional defensive operations to protect our people and regional partners, as the United Kingdom has done before and in line with international law. Reports of strikes on civilians and civilian infrastructure are deeply alarming. The protection of civilians and full respect for international law is critical. Iran must never be allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. That is why we, alongside our French and German partners, have continually supported efforts to reach a negotiated solution. We have always been clear that only a diplomatic solution can fully and sustainably address these threats. We want to see the swiftest possible resolution that ensures security and stability for the region. Iran must refrain from further strikes and its appalling behavior to allow a path back to diplomacy. We will continue to work with our partners to this end in support of peace and security and the protection of civilian life across the region. I resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful, we appreciate the Secretary General for his briefing and his contribution to this meeting. We express our sincere appreciation to the Russian Federation and China for supporting the convening of this emergency meeting of the Security Council to address the manifest aggression committed by the United States and Israeli regime. I also thank those Council members, in particular China, Pakistan, and the Russian Federation, who have today taken principled position in condemnation of this unlawful act. And it is regrettable that some members of this body, in a blatant double standard, disregarded the flagrant act of aggression committed by the US and Israel on Iran and condemn Iran for using its inherent right to self-defense under the UN Charter. Mr. President, this morning the United States regime jointly and in coordination with the Israeli regime initiated an unprovoked and premeditated aggression against the Islamic Republic of Iran for the second time in the recent months, while deliberately attacking civilian populated areas in multiple large cities of Iran where millions of people reside. As a result of this brutal armed attack, hundreds of civilians have been killed and injured. The aggression and atrocious crime of the United States regime and the Israeli regime and the deliberate and persistent targeting of civilian infrastructure are ongoing. In addition to the numerous civilian residential buildings, the aggressors have also targeted a school in the city of Minab, Hormozgan province, killing more than 100 children. The number of innocent civilians continues to rise. This is not only an act of aggression, it is a war crime and a crime against humanity. Yet today, once again, the representative of the United States, through a regrettable pattern has attempted to distort facts and rely on misinformation to justify the blatant aggression of the United States and Israel against my country. The facts, however, are unequivocal. The justification advanced by the representative of the United States today are illegal and entirely devoid of legal foundation. The baseless allegation invoked to defend this unlawful use of force have no standing under international law. The invocation of preemptive attack claims of imminent threats or other substantiated political claims cannot legitimize aggression. Such claims are unfounded legally, morally, and politically, and they contradicted the clear principles of the Charter of the United Nations. I also categorically reject the assertion made by the representative of France, the United Kingdom, and certain other Western members regarding Iran's peaceful nuclear program. These claims lack a factual and legal basis. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of the Israeli regime have openly claimed responsibility for this act of aggression and have explicitly articulated regime change as their objective, an unmistakable admission of their intent to violate Iran's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The President of the United States has falsely described this aggression as necessary to neutralize an imminent threat to the American people. This is nothing more than a deliberate attempt to mislead the international community and the US public opinion and manufacture consent for unlawful war. Similarly, the representative of the United States has cynically sought to mislead this Council. Yet history provides ample documentation that the foreign policy of the United States has repeatedly relied on unlawful force, covert intervention, and political manipulation to alter the governments of other member states. This record is well established. The reality is clear and undeniable. What is taking place today against my country by the United States and the terrorist regime of Israel is a blatant act of aggression, a full-fledged violation of international law. No justification, no accusation, no narrative of disinformation can legitimize or excuse this manifest crime and aggression. Mr. President, we have communicated on several occasions with this Council and the Secretary General about warmongering statement and interfering actions in the internal affairs of Iran by the President of the US in a blatant violation of the UN Charter and international law, and called for the Council action. Regrettably, all were unanswered. The issue before the Council is straightforward: whether any member state may, including a permanent member of this Council, through the use of force, coercion, or aggression, determine the political future of another state or impose control over its affairs. International law and the Charter are explicit on this matter. Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the Charter categorically prohibits the threats of use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. Mr. President, against this backdrop, I would like to make the following points. 1. What is occurring against my country is a clear act of aggression. It is an open armed aggression against the Islamic Republic of Iran. The United States and Israel war today is not merely a war against Iran. It is a war against the Charter of the United Nations, a war against international law, and a war against the international legal order upon which the United Nations and the Security Council have been built for over 8 decades. As the Charter affirms, the United Nations was established to save succeeding generations from a scourge of war. The Charter, adopted in 1945, is founded upon this fundamental principle. members shall refrain from threat or use of force in international relations. The sole exception is the inherent right of self-defense under Article 51, and only in the event of an armed attack, the military aggression carried out by the United States and Israel satisfies none of the criteria of lawful self-defense. Accordingly, the action of the United States and Israel constitute a manifest violation of Article 2, a peremptory norms and a fundamental principle of international law accepted by all member states. Neither the Charter nor international law recognize internal matters of a state as justification for the use of force by other states. Were this otherwise, no international legal order could endure. The rule of law would be replaced by the rule of force. 2. In responding to aggression and large-scale war, the Islamic Republic of Iran is exercising its inherent and lawful right of self-defense under Article 51 of the Charter of the United Nations. The armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran are utilizing all the necessary defensive capabilities and means to confront this criminal aggression and deter the hostile acts. Consequently, all bases, facilities, and assets of the hostile forces in the region shall be regarded as legitimate military objective within the framework of Iran's lawful exercise of self-defense. Iran will continue to exercise its right of self-defense decisively and without hesitation until the aggression ceases in full and unequivocal terms. 3. Iran remains firmly committed to respecting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of its neighboring countries. Under no circumstances will we target the sovereignty, people, or interests of our neighboring countries in the Persian Gulf. Our legitimate response have been directed solely and exclusively at the bases and assets of the hostile government of the United States that operate beyond the control of the host states. Priority has been given to the targets that diminish the aggressor capability and capacity to continue its malign actions. We had previously and formally conveyed this warning to the Secretary General and the Security Council. 4. Despite continuous U.S. hostile policy, we were sincerely and seriously pursuing the path of diplomacy and dialogue to reach a just, fair, and sustainable agreement. Yet, for the second time in the midst of the negotiation, the United States betrayed diplomacy and resorted to force and launched an attack against my country in blatant violation of Charter of the United Nations, presently interfering in Iran's internal affairs. They are even calling on the people to riot against their own government. The recent record of the United States toward Iran is equally clear. Since January 2025, the U.S. administration again reinstated the hostile approach, including the policy of so-called maximum pressure and economic strangulation through sweeping sanctions. The General Assembly has repeatedly voted by overwhelming majorities against such unilateral coercive measures. The objective of these illegal measures has been transparent, unconditional surrender. Despite repeated warning by Iran to the Secretary General and the Council regarding serious violation of the Charter by a permanent member, the Council has regrettably failed to discharge its primary responsibility, allowing the erosion of the rule of law in favor of the rule of force. 5. Just as the Israeli regime succeeded in dragging the United States into the quagmire of war with Iran, the United States, in turn, is deliberately seeking to expand the scope of the conflict by exploiting spaces in the Persian Gulf region. The hostile U.S. government dream of swallowing Iran and forcing the Islamic Republic of Iran into submission. will never be realized. This war, before being a contest of military equipment and advanced technologies, is a battle of wills. And in that battle, the Islamic Republic of Iran will prevail. Furthermore, the Islamic Republic of Iran has repeatedly affirmed its commitment to diplomacy and negotiation. However, it will never submit to pressure, coercion, or force. Diplomacy has rules and principles. It cannot coexist with aggression. 6. The duty of Council members is to defend international law and specifically the Charter. They are not called upon to judge the political system of states, nor to determine whether military aggression or economic siege leads to freedom or domination. Expression of concerns and empty condemnation are not sufficient. The Council must act. Pursuant to Article 39 of the Charter, the Security Council must immediately determine the United States and Israeli regime have committed an act of aggression and demand the immediate cessation of its unlawful use of force, including any explicit or implicit threats against Iran, and require binding assurance of non-repetition. Affirm that the United States and Israeli regime bear full international responsibility for all materials and moral damage inflicted upon the infrastructure and facilities of the Islamic Republic of Iran and are obligated to provide full reparation. Let me conclude, Mr. President, with a simple and undeniable truth. Israel and the United States have attacked Iran. They have violated international law and the Charter of the United Nations. They must be held accountable. So long as this aggression continues, Iran will continue to exercise its inherent right of self-defense firmly, proportionately, and without hesitation until the aggression ends. The Security Council must act now and stop this act of aggression immediately. Silence is complicity in this crime. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Mr. President, for 47 years, the Islamic regime in Iran has led crowds in chanting, March bar Israel, March bar America. Mr. Iravani, do you want to translate these chants? Your leaders have been chanting it for years in public events, in your parliament. March bar Israel, March bar America. They mean death to Israel, death to America. Israeli and American flags were painted on roads so they could be trampled. Our flags were burned in public squares. This is not the anger of a radical fringe. It is state-sanctioned hatred. And while those March bar chants echoed, uranium was enriched, centrifuges span, missiles were built, facilities were buried deep underground. It was never just empty rhetoric. It was preparation for action. But today, alongside our ally, the United States, we act to stop it. Israel stands before you today, having acted with the United States to confront and stop an existential threat before it became irreversible. The operation targets nuclear infrastructure, ballistic missile sites, the machinery of repression that fuels terror across our region. We did not act of impulse. We did not act of aggression. We acted out of necessity because the Iranian regime left no reasonable alternative. This joint effort will continue for as long as the threat remains. We thank President Trump and acknowledge the close cooperation between Israel and the US, which has brought the alliance between our countries to an all-time high in peace and in war. Let us be clear about what we are confronting. This regime has built nuclear weapons in blatant disregard of international law and UN resolutions. It has brutally murdered its own citizens and crushed dissent. It's happened now as we speak in cities in Iran. It has expanded missile arsenals and armed proxies across the region. It has openly declared its intention to erase Israel from the map. Now, as it faces consequences, it is launching missiles and drones across the region, endangering the UAE, where a Pakistani citizen, unfortunately, was killed. Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Iraq. As we speak, in the last hour, a rocket targeted the city of Tel Aviv. Civilians, they don't target military bases. Civilians struck a building in Tel Aviv. An innocent woman was killed, and 21 people were injured. This is a regime that destabilizes wherever it reaches. It spreads violence outward while crushing freedom at home. It is not reacting, it is expanding. It is a machinery of radicalism that does not recognize borders. Mr. President, diplomacy was exhausted. Iran was required to stop enriching uranium, stop heavy water projects, stop developing nuclear-capable missiles, and allow full inspections. Iran did none of it. Instead, it fortified its nuclear facilities so we cannot get to them, accelerated missile production, and continued to fund terror. Since the last operation in the summer, they spent billions on their proxies. The resolutions were clear. The strategy was just as clear. Delay, delay, delay. But we will not be played. And it's simple what they were planning. They were building the means to corner us, to force an irreversible reality with our backs against the wall. That is not a future Israel will accept. No responsible nation should. This operation is guided by clear objectives: eliminate immediate threats, dismantle the nuclear program, destroy its ballistic missile production, neutralize naval threats, break the proxy network that destabilizes the region. The operation was carried out in order to protect the people of Israel within the framework of the ongoing armed conflict between Israel and Iran, in line with the UN Charter and in accordance with international law. Our forces stand ready to stop extremism armed with nuclear weapons. To the soldiers of the IDF, our boys and girls, my son, my daughter, we salute you. You stand like lions defending our people. An entire nation stands behind you. We have heard the condemnation from few member states, from the Secretary General. But we all know that escalation did not begin today. It began when Iran armed proxies and exported terror, expanded missiles and drones, advanced its nuclear program in violation of its commitments, turned on its own people, beating, imprisoning, executing. Where was the outrage of the UN? Where were the consequences? Now, Israel acts to prevent an irreversible threat, and the condemnation is immediate. This is the definition of hypocrisy. Some call this aggression. We call it necessity. We call it survival. Mr. President, history has taught us never to ignore those who openly call for our destruction. When a regime says it will destroy Israel, when it chants death to Israel, when it promises to wipe Haifa and Tel Aviv off the map, we believe it. We genuinely believe it when we see those hundreds of ballistic missiles that they are launching to Israel. We believe the threats. We do not ignore them. We do not gamble with our survival. We act. Now let me address the brave people of Iran. You are not our enemies. This operation is not directed at you. It is directed at a regime that has silenced you, imprisoned you, and invested in missiles and uranium while your economy suffers. You deserve better. It is this regime, the Basij, the Revolutionary Guard, who have dragged your country into isolation. The world does not fear a free Iran. It fears a radical regime armed with nuclear weapons and driven by extremism. Your future should not be defined by those who chant for death. As President Trump has said, the Iranian people deserve dignity, security, and the chance to shape their own destiny. We are thinking about you. You are seen. You are not alone. The future of Iran belongs to its people. We stand with you. Mr. President, this week, Jewish families all around the world celebrate Purim. Many Israelis will do so now in a bomb shelter. The story of Purim happened more than 2,500 years ago, in the same place, in ancient Persia. An evil minister by the name of Haman sought to wipe out the Jewish people. And it began with words, with chants. It became a decree. It could have become a genocide. But Queen Esther refused to remain silent. She stepped forward, she spoke up, she acted before it was too late. That is the lesson we learned. It is not only an ancient lesson, it is a modern one. Last week, I stood at the gates of Auschwitz with dozens of UN ambassadors. We stood in a place that shows what happens when radicalism and extremism grows and no one stops it in time. Before the Holocaust, some leaders, serious leaders, believed that they could calm aggression with concessions. They were completely wrong. Giving in did not stop evil. It strengthened it. Winston Churchill understood what Queen Esther understood long before him. When destruction is declared and weapons are being prepared and assembled, leaders must act, not later, now. Today, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu understand that same lesson. For decades, the Iranian regime has built missiles, enriched uranium, armed proxies, and spread terror far beyond its borders. This regime is not only Israel's enemy. It is an enemy of stability, an enemy of every peace-loving nation. In this joint operation, Israel and the US are acting together, not because we see conflict, because we refuse to ignore declared destruction. We are stopping extremism before it becomes unstoppable. We will ensure that no radical regime armed with nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles can threaten our people or the entire world. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Israel for the statement. I will now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Majed A. Abdulaziz, Permanent Observer of the League of Arab States to the United Nations.
Shukran.
Thank you, Mr. President.
OK, well, let's leave UN representatives there for the moment. The last speaker that we heard from, Danny Danon, Israeli representative at the UN, he thanked President Trump. He said that his bravery had brought the alliance between their countries to an all-time high. Iran has fortified its nuclear facilities and continues to fund terror. They've advanced nuclear program in violation of its commitments. And he went on to say that some call it aggression, but we call it necessary. That is, that Operation Epic Fury is necessary. We call it survival. We're listening to that as our US correspondent Mark Stone. And Mark, Danny Danon there, reiterating the fact that nuclear facilities are continuing to be progressed by Iran, the reason why Donald Trump made that strike along with Israel.
Yeah, I mean, it was powerful stuff from Danny Danon. I imagine that is a speech he has been imagining having to make for some time to come. I mean, an extraordinary day. That old phrase, there are decades when nothing happens and then weeks when decades happen. Well, it feels like this is a day when decades have happened. Such remarkable unfolding of events over the course of the past 12 hours since those missiles and rockets were first launched by the Americans and by the Israelis, and then the retaliation that we have seen from the Iranians. Then, of course, the news that the supreme leader of Iran, supreme leader for 37 years, Ali Khamenei, is dead, according to President Trump. Just before we heard from Danny Danon, we heard from Saeed Iravani, the representative for the Islamic Republic of Iran. I saw his name plaque there, and it said Islamic Republic of Iran, and you do kind of wonder, is this one of the last times that a representative of that regime will speak in a chamber like that? And before him, we heard from James Kariuki, who is the representative of the United Kingdom. I was struck by the different shots that we saw in the chamber there. It's a chamber that reflects the world, different allegiances, competing visions for what the world should look like in one place on an extraordinary day.
Thank you very much for the moment. Thank you for that. Well, if you're just joining us, it is now 11 o'clock. A reminder of our breaking news this evening. Donald Trump claims US forces have killed Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. They carried out a series of raids across Iran, in the process flattening Khamenei's compound in Tehran. Rumours started early this evening that the main aim of the attacks, the death of Khamenei, had been achieved. And then just a couple of hours ago, Donald Trump posted this message on Truth Social, in which he said, Khamenei, one of the most evil people in history, is dead. This is not only justice for the people of Iran, but for all great Americans and those people from many countries throughout the world that have been killed or mutilated by Khamenei and his gang of bloodthirsty thugs. He was unable to avoid our intelligence and highly sophisticated tracking systems, and working closely with Israel, there was not a thing he or the other leaders that have been killed along with him could do. This is the single greatest chance for the Iranian people to take back their country. We are hearing that many of their IRGC military and other security and police forces no longer want to fight and are looking for immunity from us. As I said last night, now they can have immunity. Later, they only get death. Hopefully, the IRGC and police will peacefully merge with the Iranian patriots and work together as a unit to bring back the country to the greatness it deserves. That process should soon be starting, in that not only the death of Khamenei but the country has been, in only one day, very much destroyed and even obliterated. The heavy and pinpoint bombing, however, will continue uninterrupted throughout the week or as long as necessary to achieve our objective of peace throughout the Middle East and indeed the world. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Let's bring it now. US correspondent Mark Stone, that Truth Social post from Donald Trump confirming that Khamenei has been killed.
Yes, and we await reaction from Iran. There has been none so far to this news in terms of reaction from the regime itself, but I can tell you that there has been reaction from the United Nations chamber of the Security Council, as we've heard, different people, different leaders or different representatives, I should say, offering different views on what has happened, and I think some confliction as well, because there will be many members of the United Nations Security Council who clearly welcome the downfall of the regime, but have real unease about the methods that have been chosen. I was watching the Security Council chamber just now, and it felt almost quaint at times, because, of course, what President Trump has done over the course of the past day is to completely bypass any old avenues through which this sort of military action would happen, whether it be the United Nations, whether it be Congress here in the United States, in Washington. Congress was not notified that this would happen. It has been unilateral action by the Americans and by the Israelis, with profound consequences for Iran, of course, for the region. Yes, over the course of the past day, we've seen the counterattacks in Gulf Arab countries. But what about the days ahead? Regime change appears to be what Donald Trump is trying to engineer, but he wants to do it from a distance. He wants to do it over the horizon. And in that sense, what we're seeing unfolding today is very different from regime change of the past. 2003, Iraq, for example, that was clear regime change. There was not much of a plan for what happened the day after, but what it did do back then with the neoconservatives who were in charge under the Bush administration back then, it meant boots on the ground, and it was a disaster, and there were years of war and an insurgency which followed. We all know that history. What Trump is trying to achieve with this is different and is articulated in that Truth Social post. He is now calling on the Iranian people to do this themselves. We've got rid of the leader, we've cut the head off the snake and all of those other snakes around him. So the President of the United States is saying, now we call on you, the Iranian people, to rise up. Very, very difficult for them to do, given what happened just a month or so, less than a month or so ago. So many thousands of Iranians killed as they tried then to rise up. Now you must do it, he says. This is your chance. And that sentiment echoed by the Israeli leadership as well. So it's over the horizon regime change. Neil Ferguson, the historian, has been commentating over the last few hours. He calls it regime alteration. So it's a sort of halfway between regime change and regime collapse, that middle ground where you hope that the people of Iran will take up this opportunity. But it's a big, big, big gamble. Iran is such a huge country with competing interests within it. So many hundreds of thousands of people signed up, not just by paycheck, but by ideology to the regime that has now been decapitated. And so the risk of a quagmire and regional conflict is absolutely huge. But for this truly consequential American president, it is a gamble he's willing to take. It is a dice he has rolled.
Mark, thank you very much. For those just joining us, a reminder of the breaking news. The United States and Israel have launched their Operation Epic Fury, targeting Iran, and we know that Iran has retaliated across the Middle East. With me tonight, the journalist and author Christina Patterson and Jasmine El-Gamal, a political analyst and former Middle East advisor at the US Department of Defense, and our international affairs editor Dominic Waghorn is also here with us. To them in a moment, but first we're going to speak to Roya Boromond, Executive Director of the Abdurrahman Boromond Centre for Human Rights in Iran. Thank you for joining us. We've been hearing reports via Reuters news agency that people are out on the streets in Tehran celebrating. Does that come as any surprise to you? Will the majority of people in Tehran be pleased that this attack has taken place on Iran?
Well, thank you for having me. And no, I am not surprised at all. We've been in touch with a lot of people in Iran since the massacres of January, and not a single one, was opposed to Americans, to the strikes. And you have to understand that people have tried in many different ways to have a say in their destiny, or to at least participate in their, the policy making of the country. And they have been repressed, and they have been killed, and they have been ignored. So, and it's not only Tehran, in Mashhad, in Behbahan, in many cities, people have come out because they know, a doctor told me, we are fighting against people who are armed to the teeth and willing to kill with a wooden spoon. So, there should be some understanding of why they're celebrating. I would have liked him to be tried in a court with due process and have all his victims come and testify about what has happened, and what they did to them. But we lost that opportunity. But you can't blame Iranians for being cheerful. I mean, they don't know how to get some freedom. They have tried everything, and they have been killed. So it's also very, I don't know how President Trump expects Iranians to take over, because you have hundreds of armed Revolutionary Guards and Basij, and they have nowhere to go because they can't really qualify as refugees, and they have blood on their hands. And so, Iranians have no training, no arms, and they can come in massive numbers. And right now, for example, in Behbahan, in Abdaran, in Sabzevar, they came out to celebrate, and they were shot at, and they went. Thank God, I don't think there was, casualties. But it's not as simple as that. There has to be a political solution. And I always said that the nuclear negotiation had to have a political component that negotiates the exit of this regime in a peaceful way. But now, I hope that, there will be no bloodshed, but I don't see what the plan is.
That was going to be my next question, that Donald Trump has encouraged the people to take over government, to come out on the streets. He's saying that this is their one chance to design their future and their destiny. But what is the process? It seems that there is a vacuum which is only leading to anarchy.
Well, there is a candidate for leading the transition, and a lot of people in Iran have called his name, the Crown Prince. But again, there is no boots on the ground as far as, we can tell. So how is this going to happen? Calling the Revolutionary Guards to join the Patriots, as I said, is a little bit more complicated than that. Even if they were not ideologized, they are scared of the population. There is a lot of anger in the population and a lot of hope, obviously. But if Iranians do to them what they did to the members of the previous regime, they would be scared. There has to be some negotiated transition, and so that people don't get killed in masses. We've been documenting the people who are killed by the states inside, outside Iran, and it's, it has been a harrowing process, because thousands and thousands and tens of thousands over the years have been arbitrarily killed or extrajudicially killed in some way. So I think, you can expect Iranians to come out, and they may come out, but, taking over from armed mass killers is going to be difficult.
Final question. Is there an interim figure within Iran that patriots, as you describe them, and as Donald Trump has described them, can rally behind?
Well, I mean, what the Islamic Republic has done is to actually prevent any dissident organization to survive and to grow. And there are individual dissidents, but you don't know if they are able to lead because they are in prison or they have spent years in prison off and on. And whoever has some charisma and has some influence, whether they are political actors or not, they get annihilated and undermined and weakened. So I don't know, we need this political space to open up, and we need people to form political parties, and we need to see, who may come out of this political process. But there has been no political process. The elections in Iran are not free. People have to elect a selected candidate, and those who select the candidates are not elected. They are clerics and they are religious jurists, and they have not been elected, as the leader was never elected. He controlled the judiciary, he controlled the armed forces, and he controlled the foreign policy. So, the Iranians, that's why Iranians are in the streets. It's not like they like to be shot or they like to be bombed. It's just that there is no path for them, to political participation. They have a right to participate in the country's public life, and this right has been taken away from them for 45 years unless they agree with the state.
Roya Borman, thank you very much for speaking to us, Executive Director of the Abdurrahman Borman Centre for Human Rights in Iran. I want to bring in Dominic Waghorn now. Dominic, speaking there with Roya about a figure that perhaps Iranians can rally around, can we look to the son of the Shah in the United States?
Well, I think, the Iranian opposition groups are very divided, and that's, deliberately the product of a deliberate strategy by the Iranian leadership over many, many years. Pahlavi is someone who, engenders loyalty and support from some Iranians in the diaspora, but many others are very much opposed to him. And I think the problem here is that we're entering very uncharted territory. And I think we need to take a step back and sort of put into some kind of perspective what we've seen today. As Mark was saying, this is decades or weeks telescoped into a day. Normally, a decapitation strategy or the removal of the leader of a state comes at the end of possibly, months or years of war. Look at Hitler or look at Saddam Hussein. And this has happened right at the very beginning of this war, if it's the case. And, of course, we have to qualify all of this because we still don't know for sure that Khamenei is dead, and information is being used, will be used for various means. But assuming that he is dead, the way he's been killed, it looks like he was in one meeting and possibly there were other meetings, and a whole level of Iranian leadership has been removed in one stroke. So what will that lead to? I mean, I think, it's the end of the regime as we know it. If that is the case, it's the end of the Iranian Revolution as we've known it. But what remains is a sizable 200,000 or 300,000 strong sort of force of the Securitate, you might call it in sort of Soviet parlance. So, IRGC guardsmen, Basij, paramilitary goons with guns, the police, the army, spies, all those sort of branches of the Iranian sort of power structure. They're still there, they're armed, they will be feeling pretty desperate, very disconcerted by what has happened. And they'll know that the enemy has managed to pull off another masterstroke in finding out where the supreme leader was, targeting him at a time when the regime should have been on its guard more than at any other time. So that will be disconcerting, I think, very worrying for what remains of the regime, those hundreds of thousands of armed people, more and more desperate. And as we were hearing there, people are coming out onto the streets, but the reports are that these guardsmen and others are coming out and shooting them. So it's hard to see how you go from this to a kind of popular uprising that Donald Trump seems to be calling for. He's called for those with guns to hand them in, otherwise they face certain death. So I think it's a really, really worrying, perilous moment for Iran, obviously. And I think we have to sort of assume that there are other plans. This has been carried out, it seems, with very effective choreographed military precision so far, and we have to assume that there are plans the Israelis and the Americans have for what happens next. But you've got to caveat that, I think, with bearing in mind that Donald Trump is someone who likes to shoot from the hip. He likes to roll the dice. He likes one-and-done operations. And if you look at his other kind of achievements, if you can call them that, of recent months, what's happened in Venezuela, that was another spectacular operation, but it's led to a very uncertain outcome. We don't know what's going to happen in Venezuela now. In Gaza, you know, it's led to the Great Peace Plan has effectively led to the reoccupation of Gaza by the Israelis. We don't know how that's going to play out either. The Israeli offensive against Hezbollah in South Lebanon has, you know, begun also with an extraordinary masterstroke, killing Nasrallah and other leaders. But we're still now in a kind of ongoing conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. We saw more airstrikes there over the last 48 hours. That's not resolved either. This is not a president who has a plan sort of in these kind of situations that stretches much more than days or weeks ahead. And his administration will be trying to keep up with what he's been doing and rolling the dice. That is a particularly, I think, worrying sort of outlook, I think, for Iran and for the region and allies, as they also struggle to try and keep up with the pace of events out there.
Well, let's hear a little more on the domestic response. Our political correspondent Amanda Acas joins me now. And the Prime Minister has spoken to Donald Trump, hasn't he?
Yes, so we're told the two of them did have a phone call earlier on this evening, although the details that Downing Street have provided are pretty sketchy. They've literally said they discussed the situation in the Middle East. No further information about whether there was agreement, disagreement, support, criticism, anything else, any discussion of whether the UK had any foreknowledge of what exactly happened. And then a second sentence, the Prime Minister set out that the UK was taking part in coordinated regional defensive operations to protect British people and regional partners following Iran's indiscriminate retaliatory strikes on allies in the region. So this refers to what the Prime Minister was talking about in his statement earlier about British planes in the skies as part of an operation to defend British people, interests and allies in the region, which he said was in line with international law. Now, I think Downing Street will be very glad that this call has taken place. And as I say, clearly there's no real indication about whether it was cordial or particularly detailed. I think the lack of information there might suggest it was quite a brief call. But still, given the importance that Downing Street have placed on trying to develop that closeness with the White House and to maintain the special relationship, even though clearly the UK hasn't been involved in these strikes and didn't, it seems, give the US permission to use its military bases as part of this, despite the fact that Donald Trump had clearly signalled previously that he was keen to use both RAF Fairfield and Diego Garcia in the Chagos Islands. So they have been clearly trying not to antagonise him. There's been no criticism, no open criticism from the Prime Minister of the US-Israeli strike, despite a lot of pressure from many, some in the left of his party, but also from other groups in the left of British politics, the Green Party, your party, and so on, urging the Prime Minister to come out and criticise what they've described as illegal, unjust, unprovoked actions. Now, clearly that's not something that he's done. Those on the right of politics, the Conservatives, are saying, no, the UK should be openly offering our support to our two allies, the US and to Israel. Nigel Farage saying we should be opening up our military bases. Sir Keir Starmer should be offering his military support in that way to the US over this. So quite a spectrum of opinion, and both sides really criticising him for seeming to sit on the fence, as it were. And certainly in his televised statement earlier, I think what was quite interesting about it was that he was vehement really in his criticism and his condemnation of Iran. He described the regime as abhorrent. He talked about the regime murdering its own people, as well as posing a direct threat in the UK, particularly to the Jewish community and to defectors from the Iranian regime. And he went on really to echo many of the kinds of arguments that we've heard from the US about the importance of Iran giving up its weapons programs and ending its repression of its own people. He didn't go as far as calling for regime change, of course, as we heard from Donald Trump. But I think in a way it was in a sense he was seeming to kind of express support for the ends, if not really being willing to give an opinion about the means. Clearly he is a human rights lawyer. He's MPs from the Labour Party. They're very live to the difficulties of intervention in the Middle East, clearly after everything that happened when Tony Blair supported the US in the invasion of Iraq in 2003. But I think, once again, Sir Keir Starmer has been in a position where he's trying to tread that delicate tightrope, as it were, of the diplomatic relationship between the UK and the US, whilst being very mindful of the strong opinions in the UK about that action by the US and Israel.
OK, Amanda, thank you very much detailing that call between Sir Keir Starmer and Donald Trump for us there. Well, with me tonight, journalist and author Christina Patterson and Jasmine El Gamal, a political analyst and former Middle East advisor at the US Department of Defense. Welcome to both of you again. Hearing there from Amanda on that telephone conversation between Sir Keir Starmer and Donald Trump. Very interesting what she said there, that Sir Keir Starmer maybe supports the ends but not the means.
I think it will have been an agonising conversation for him because he is a human rights lawyer. He changes his mind about things all the time, but I don't think he does change his mind about international law, because international law is a thing and it's fairly clearly laid out. And it's fairly clear that Donald Trump has broken it, and so has Netanyahu. They have not presented. It's the echoes with Iraq are so sort of deafening, really. There was talking of sexing up in this country, the whole dossier about the weapons of mass destruction, which turned out not to exist. We've been told that an attack on the US was imminent. No evidence. Well, of course an attack on the US wasn't imminent. Iran can't even get anywhere near the US. And plus, Trump said that last year he destroyed its nuclear capacity for decades. So those two things completely contradict each other. So Keir Starmer has also just lost a safe Labour seat in a by-election, coming third to the Greens, partly because of Gaza, because of Labour's position on Gaza, and the Greens won partly because they issued, among other things, leaflets targeted very much to Muslims, talking about Labour's strategy on Gaza. So this will be a really, really sore issue for him. And he has worked hard to build up the relationship with Donald Trump. Whether he actually likes him personally, who knows? But I'm absolutely sure he doesn't support most of what Donald Trump does. But his hands are tied. That's what you have to do in a world where the power lies with one man. You know, it's very difficult to stand up to him. Mark Carney did quite a good job, and maybe we should be standing up to him more. But in this particular situation, I think it will be really, really difficult for him.
And Jasmine, on Donald Trump's part, he famously said that he didn't want any more forever wars. Mm-hmm. His base at home, this is not what they want. They don't want to get involved in more international conflicts, but this is exactly what he's doing.
Right. I mean, it all goes also to the domestic political considerations that you mentioned, Christina, earlier. But President Trump is facing a lot of pressure at home. The Epstein files and all the drama surrounding that, and all it's a very opaque situation. The administration is not being forthcoming. Midterms are coming. I mean, you could think of all kinds of reasons that how domestic politics does tend to shape international decision-making. You know, we all know that. So I think that he is going to have to answer not just to his base and talk about those promises that he made during the campaign and why he appears to be violating them, but also to Congress. One of the congressmen who was in the briefing to the so-called Gang of Eight intelligence committees and security committees in Congress, who got a briefing from Secretary Marco Rubio just before the State of the Union, came out of it and posted and said, this is a war of choice with no strategic endpoint. This is someone who got the briefing before the strikes. And so the president really is going to have to answer to Congress and to the American public, who has seen this road before to endless war without any strategic end goal and without any reason. We were talking earlier about Israeli national interests and how we all understand Israel's position vis-a-vis Iran. What is the U.S.'s position vis-a-vis Iran? Where is the existential threat to the United States that leads a president without any permission from either the public or Congress to go into war and put not just U.S. troops, not just Iranians at risk? We talked about the schoolgirls that were killed and other civilian casualties, but we haven't mentioned the region that is absolutely on fire now. You're seeing burning civilian infrastructure.
You know, hotels, some of us have stayed at.
The Burj Al Arab in Dubai, you're seeing Bahrain in flames. 5 out of the 6 GCC countries have been attacked. Not just U.S. military installations, but civilian infrastructure. The region is going to have to decide what its response is going to be. So you have these circles of decisions, decision-making between. First, you have the Iranians who are going to have to decide what to do, both the remnants of the regime, if it is indeed true that the supreme leader has died along with the top leadership, the Iranian people and what they're going to decide to do and how much risk they want to take to themselves. So that's the Iranian component. You have the regional component and what the region is going to do. And then you have the U.S. component, of course, heavily influenced by the Israeli prime minister, who has wanted regime change for decades, certainly ever since I was working at the Pentagon in 2008. So lots of moving pieces, lots of different decision-making points that we're going to see over the next few days. I would say this is really certainly just the beginning of a process that, we don't really know where it will lead, but I think accountability is going to be really important here and asking tough questions, but also holding people accountable. The Europeans haven't done a great job of holding the president accountable in their public statements today, and I hope to see that changing over the next few days, but certainly Congress and the American people will want to hold this president accountable.
I agree with you, but I think we Europeans are hidebound by Ukraine. I think that is underpinning absolutely everything, because there is a war in Europe. People aren't talking about it very much, but it's just gone into its 5th year, and we need US support. And of course, Trump is only giving tiny bits. I mean, he's not supporting. In fact, if he wants to get rid of evil dictators, why doesn't he go and bomb Putin? Obviously, he's not going to do that, but he would have. It's a very equivalent situation. If he cared about democracy, he would do that. He would do that in North Korea. Obviously, Putin has nuclear bombs and Iran doesn't, and apparently wouldn't have them for a long time because apparently Trump destroyed them last year. But I think we in Europe do not dare stand up to Trump because of Ukraine.
But I totally get that, but that also is a bit self-inflicted as well, right?
Oh, no, I agree, but we are where we are.
We are where we are.
And we can't get up to NATO. We do not, we can't get our defence funding up to the point it needs to be now. We have to have a few years for that.
But it's just very surreal. It's based on the assumption that Trump will allow Europe to fail, basically, which I think is a false assumption. And it's also very surreal just to have come right out of the Munich Security Conference and hear a European leader one after the other talking about a new world order and accountability and international law, and we have to do things differently. Even Mark Carney, after that rousing speech in Davos, just put out a statement saying, we're with the Americans, whatever you do.
I'm amazed by Mark Carney.
6 paragraphs and not one line about international law.
I was shocked by the Mark Carney, really shocked.
Shall we return to Donald Trump's statement that he put out that Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is dead? It marked a dramatic moment in an extraordinary day, which started early this morning when the Middle East was plunged into another conflict after the United States and Israel carried out a massive attack on Iran. Our Middle East correspondent Adam Parsons reports.
This was a war that started in daylight on a Saturday morning. A war that had long been predicted, but whose sudden start came as a violent surprise. A main target was this, the Tehran compound of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader. It was flattened. And when Israel's Prime Minister gave his response at the end of this first tumultuous day, he alluded to Khamenei's death.
This morning, in a powerful surprise attack, we destroyed the compound of the dictator Khamenei in the heart of Tehran. For 3.5 decades, this cruel dictator who terrorized the world with the scorn of his people and who worked tirelessly, without a care, on the plan to flatten Israel. This plan is gone, and there are many signs that this dictator is gone too.
That expression, gone, begged the question as to whether Netanyahu thought that Ayatollah Khamenei was dead or simply deposed. But reports then emerged that Israeli officials did believe that Khamenei's body lay in the rubble of his compound. It was a claim the Iranian regime denied.
Now, can you confirm with specificity that the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is alive, and separately that the Iranian president is alive right now following these American and Israeli strikes?
As far as I know, yes, they are alive. And the head of judiciary as well, the head of the Speaker of Parliament as well, all high-ranking officials are alive, and the Secretary of the National Security Council. So everybody is now in its position, and we are handling this situation, and everything is fine.
But America's president said he thought the story was correct, that Khamenei was dead, along with much of Iran's leadership. Earlier, he had been typically bullish about America's war aims.
We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated. We're going to annihilate their navy. We're going to ensure that the region's terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region or the world and attack our forces.
The attack brought a response, Iran launching a barrage of missiles towards Israel. Very large boom we've just heard in the skies above us, above Jerusalem. And so this is the cacophony. And that's another trail there, and you can hear a jet flying overhead. You see that large plume of smoke there from another interception. This is the soundtrack to Israel at the moment, and that's another element to it. Just that chiming sound you can hear is the alert that is now played out on mobile phones and devices across this country. That is a warning that is sent out on apps on people's phones and other devices, warning them of incoming missiles and telling them to take shelter. That's a very, very loud intercept there. That doesn't feel as if that one is too far away. But Iran's response went much wider than just Israel. In Bahrain, where a port and an American base were among the targets. In Dubai, where Iranian missiles struck buildings, including the famous Fairmont Hotel. And in Qatar, rocked by missiles and explosions. Attacks went on into the night. Israel launched the largest aerial assault in its history. Iran has continued by firing missiles back. In this most volatile of regions, war is always a prospect, and now, once again, it has become a reality. America has extraordinary might. Israel has long-held convictions. But for Iran's regime, this is now a fight for survival. The stakes are toweringly, worryingly high. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well, Donald Trump told the Iranian people he wanted to help them achieve freedom. And these are scenes tonight from the streets of Iran. In videos posted on social media, crowds can be seen gathering in the streets, as we see there, and dancing and cheering, cars honking their horns. Some carried pictures of protesters killed in the anti-government demonstrations last month. Certainly the streets there full of people seemingly celebrating. Well, let's bring in Nega Anga now, former senior advisor at the US Department of State and the White House National Security Council. Thank you for speaking to us this evening. Has the United States violated international law by carrying out this strike?
Good evening, and thanks for having me on. I think we're going to have to see over the next few days how the assessment is made. He obviously made the announcement in the middle of the night in the United States through Truth Social. Ambassador Mike Waltz has been making the claims in New York earlier this evening about the intentions behind the U.S. actions. There's quite a bit of statement that the United States felt a potential immediate attack from Iran. And so there's quite a bit that will need to be unpacked, both from an international legal perspective, but also a domestic, United States domestic legal perspective. But so much is happening within this essentially phase one of whatever this sort of attack is. And we'll have to see.
But it is factual to say that Donald Trump has circumvented Congress by not consulting them before carrying out these attacks.
Indeed. He, unlike in 2003, in advance of the Iraq invasion, there was no congressional briefing. The American public did not have time to learn more about it, to be able to have a public debate about the intentions behind this. And again, you know, this happened, even the mentioning, even the attacks occurred in the middle of the night in the United States. And so there are quite a bit of frustration, not only from the domestic, the Democratic side of the House in Congress, but you also have quite a bit of Republicans, and including the MAGA base, who are quite concerned and quite upset about these actions and not something that they were supportive of. The one thing that the MAGA base has been very clear is that they did not want to enter into any forever wars, especially a forever war in the Middle East. And Iran is not Venezuela, right? It's much more complicated. There is a larger regional implications as well. And lastly, you know, what we're going to see is the market on the fritz, you know, supply chains, you know, given the insurance policies increasing and the length of time to pass through the region, you know, prices are going to spike, and that's going to upset the American public because of their pocketbooks. So I think this is going to be a bumpy road for the administration to articulate why this was in the best interest of the United States and the American public. But he did not engage with the American public or in the international community in advance of these actions.
You're a former senior advisor at the US Department of State and the White House National Security Council. How unusual is this? I mean, have you seen anything of its ilk in your time?
This is quite unusual. This is an effort that had almost little to no process. And it's quite important because I'm sure your viewers appreciate the fact that, you know, there are layers to how these decision-making processes take place. There's quite a bit of conversation, there's debate, there's the ability to have the pros and cons, to be able to understand what the President of the United States, what decision he's going to make. No one wants to set up the President of the United States for failure. It's about success. But in this scenario, it was a very small group of advisors who had a sense of the actions and the conversations with the president. And I think, you know, if I can speculate, there's quite a bit of those sort of pros and cons and the debates that you would have naturally at a much more junior level in the process that would allow for him to make either more coherent decisions or take certain actions, preemptive actions, to stack the deck to ensure that the international community is on board in some way, or the American and congressional audiences are on board in the same way.
The Representative for the Islamic Republic of Iran in the UN Security Council said that the justification by US for their aggression's baseless. Allegations to defend this illegal use of force. It violates clear principles of the Charter of the United Nations and international law. The President of the US and the PM of Israel specified regime change as their objective, and it violates Iranian sovereignty.
Well, exactly. But we also have to bear in mind that where the Iranian government stands, there is quite a bit of confusion, and potential leadership vacuum that they are also dealing with. If the reports are actually accurate that Khamenei is potentially dead, then not only is this extraordinarily dangerous, but they're trying to ensure that the decision-making chains will not be slower, and they're going to be more reactive. They're going to be more protective. So in many ways, it was to be expected, the statements that the Iranian representative was making at the UN Security Council. Again, the American government has quite a bit that it needs to articulate to the international community, to the Security Council, to Congress. But I think for President Trump, one of the things that he has been able to operate in is that there's been very little blowback in terms of some of the decisions that he's made, not only under Trump 1.0, but also Trump 2.0, whether it was pulling out of the JCPOA, whether it was the killing of Soleimani, whether it was the Tolbert War, and now here we are with these attacks. So we're going to have to see how this plays out over the next couple of days.
Nega Anga, thank you very much for sharing your expertise with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, events in the Middle East are making the front pages of nearly all of tomorrow's newspapers. On the front of the Telegraph, Donald Trump's claims that Iran's supreme leader has been killed in today's airstrikes. The Observer also reporting on claims by Israel that Iran's supreme leader's body has been found. The Times leads with a quote from Donald Trump that one of the most evil people in history is dead, as he urges Iranian people to take back their country. The Sun also leads with the reported death of Ali Khamenei after a series of strikes on his security bunker in Tehran. The headline of the Sunday Express reads, "War erupts across Middle East," reporting that hundreds were killed in the airstrikes. While the Mirror warns that Brits have been told to find shelter as revenge strikes rock the region. The Star also reports on blast hitting tourist hotspots as Iran strikes back at the US attack. Well, still with me, Christina and Jasmine, to take us through, just reflecting on that last headline, because my daughter is on holiday in Dubai and her hotel's 2 minutes from the Fairmont that was hit. So it's quite a worrying time. They've been told to go into the basement. Mattresses have been taken down there, and that's where they'll be spending the night. She went for a holiday, and she's in a war zone.
Unbelievable. I don't know how you've managed to do this evening, actually, Gillian. I mean, I'm sure she will be fine, and she is sheltering. But
yeah,
honestly,
no, I have to believe that. But shall we start with the Telegraph front page and that headline that Khamenei dead in rubble? This has been confirmed by Donald Trump, also the Israelis. But from Iran, we're hearing that all of the main players, all of the leadership figures are alive and well.
Right. I mean, look, when Hassan Nasrallah was assassinated in Lebanon, it also took some time for that confirmation to come from Hezbollah. So it's not unusual to, for the Iranians to figure out, if he is indeed dead, whether they want to confirm, when they want to confirm. And of course, that it could be that he's not dead. So many uncertainties right now. Obviously, this is the theme of tonight. There's so much that we don't know. But that whether or not he is dead, and when Iran confirms one way or the other, you have to imagine will have some impact on people's decision to go out into the streets or to continue what they're doing. If there is a sense that this regime may still be in place, that the repressive security apparatus is still in place, you can imagine people being really scared to go out into the streets. I always find it, I grew up in the Middle East, and I was in Iraq in the first weeks of the invasion, and at the same time I worked at the Pentagon and national security in the U.S. and I always find it so surreal how wide of a gulf there is between. Was it you, Christina, that said armchair analysts before?
Yes.
I mean, I always find it so surreal how people, not just armchair analysts, but people in governments, in Western governments, in positions of power and responsibility, can be so lackadaisical about the lives and the safety and the livelihoods of people in the region, any country, really. But, when we're talking about the Middle East, there's this sense that almost that people are expendable, right? Like, go out, protest. What does that mean?
Absolutely.
That means people's lives. Every one of those lives is a human life worthy of living, just like yours. And so I would love to see more of that when it comes to public officials telling people what to do in the region, especially if they're the ones injecting all of this uncertainty and this lack of safety into the scenario, to be a little bit more cognizant and respectful of what people are actually living through in the region. And really, I'm so sorry to hear that, about you. You must be a basket case, although you can't tell, which is so professional of you. But I'm sure she'll be okay. And I'm sure, I can't see Iran really going much further with the Gulf at this point. And I hope she comes home very soon. But really, that human element and what people really go through in the region when all these Western leaders are making their statements is something that really gets to me.
And to that point, when the protests were ongoing and Donald Trump was saying to people, go out on the streets, protest, there was a story that I read of one individual whose family did not want him to go out on the streets and said it's not safe. And he said, no, Trump's going to come and save us, I'll be fine. And sadly, he lost his life.
It's heartbreaking,
Donald Trump is saying now,
exactly.
Go out
what does
on the
he
streets.
care? I mean, he seems to be incapable of any acts of, or many acts of human empathy. I think he has something wrong with I think he is a sociopath, and I think he is pretty incapable of imagining what it's like to be another human being, because every single thing he says and does is about himself. But we saw these 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds going out in the street. I'm actually furious with Pahlavi as well. He's been having his lovely life in the US. He's not a politician. He's just a guy who happened to be the son of the Shah, who wasn't exactly...
Why are you furious with him?
I'm furious with him because he has been urging Iranians to go on the street for weeks, and maybe 10,000, maybe 15,000 gave up their lives because of his completely casual, distant, comfortable exhortations to risk their lives. If you are 16 or 17 or 18, you don't know. You don't understand how easily your life is lost. You don't probably understand how precious it is. You don't understand your mortality. Unfortunately, these people should know better. They should know, because they have seen enough people die on our TV screens, even if not in their own family. And Pahlavi, in particular, having seen what happened to Iran, one of my closest friends is a poet from Iran. She hasn't been back since the revolution. But if you know what happened to your people and what has happened to your people since that revolution, it is totally immoral, in my view, to encourage people. I think this is the most dangerous moment, because people may well think the regime has gone, even if Khamenei is dead. And I suspect the Israeli intelligence on that is correct, because if there is one thing they're good at, it's intelligence and warfare. Unfortunately, they're not so great on morality, but we'll put that to one side for the moment. I think that may well be accurate, but it certainly doesn't mean that the whole apparatus is gone. And as Dominic said, that there are hundreds of thousands of armed people out there. What are they going to do now? They've spent their whole lives trained to respond completely instantly to any threats, and there's nothing to indicate that would stop. And the alternative is civil war. Well, we saw what happened in Syria. Heartbreaking.
By the way, I quickly on Pahlavi, I just fleetingly saw a post about someone saying he was on a podcast, saying that after all of what he said and encouraged, he's saying that he can't see himself spending more than half his time in Iran because he has social obligations and professional obligations in the U.S. So just case in point to what we're talking about here. It's really, really egregious.
That's incredible, that post. You were mentioning before about whether people would feel safe to go back on the streets of Tehran or across Iran. And we've seen pictures tonight, I don't know if we can bring those up, of people celebrating, seemingly out on the streets in Tehran. So in their minds, they must believe that the regime has fallen.
Yes, I mean, look, I'm not comfortable. You know, we've heard from 2 Iranian guests today, and Nega is a wonderful Iranian-American analyst. We used to work together in the U.S. government, so I had her on my podcast recently, actually talking about Iran. She's wonderful and very smart. So I would defer, you know, to an Iranian really to talk about the feeling on the street. But of course, as you mentioned, you know, there is celebration and a sense of disbelief that, you know, this man who has had such an iron grip and has been so oppressive and repressive, and really just, you know, when you see everything that's happened to Iranians under this regime, the women life freedom movement and the women who are murdered, you know, just for wanting to walk down the street without covering their heads. I mean, this, like I said at the very beginning, not many people are going to mourn this man or this regime if it eventually collapses. And it goes beyond Iranians as well. We're talking about everybody in the region, everyone in the region who suffered under this regime's terror, really, and through its proxies is going to be celebrating tonight. But it doesn't mean that people are also not afraid of what comes next, because someone wrote an Iranian commentary that basically said almost like, you know, I think he said something like, we're in a burning house, but we also know there are so many threats outside, you know, surrounding us. On one hand, no one, you know, not many people are under the illusion that the US or Israel have their best interests at heart or are doing this for the good of the people. Certainly, you can ask Iraqis about that. You can ask Libyans about that after Obama went into Libya. You can ask Yemenis, I mean, all over the region. So you can be celebrating the demise of Khamenei while also being very uncertain and have a lot of trepidation about what could come next because of who is behind this regime change operation and their track record in the region.
And as well as the external forces, Christina, there will be those within Iran who supported Khamenei, and there are those that are, as Dominic was saying and you alluded to, those who are armed and there, but still supporting the regime. So it's an extremely precarious time,
it's the people who support the regime who have the guns. And unfortunately, I mean, it always makes me so angry when people encourage street protests. I mean, I think their model is kind of, you know, the Eastern Europe and some of those peaceful revolutions, but unfortunately not all of them ended up peaceful. And as we saw what happened in the Middle East, the what's it called, spring, the Arab Spring, you know, when everybody was hopeful then, and look what happened. Civil war is a real possibility. Unfortunately, very often when you remove a dictator, and we don't know if his regime has been toppled, but when you remove a dictator, often dictators hold together fighting factions. There is, the Middle East is full of different tribal interests, and you know, the idea that this is some fairy tale ending is just for the birds. And of course, we don't expect to have Trump to have a more sophisticated understanding of that, because he doesn't know anything about history. I doubt he even really has followed what happened in the Iraq War. But you would expect the infrastructure of the most powerful country in the world to have a few people in it who might say, you know what, President Trump, this isn't a great idea. Let's come up with a strategy, because hundreds of thousands of people died in Iraq, and our own soldiers died in Iraq, and the region has been even more unstable since we took that action. And look what happened in Afghanistan. But nobody has, clearly.
I mean, the U.S. Defense Secretary's previous job was a Fox News host.
I know. I
mean, it's insane.
And he's changed his title to Secretary of War because he obviously finds it titillating. And that's the other thing, that for these people, it's a game.
Mm-hmm.
Christina and Jasmine, thank you so much for taking us through today's extraordinary proceedings, in that we've seen the United States and Israel launch an operation against Iran, to which they have responded. That was The Wrap. Thank you so much for watching. More on the Middle East coming up right now.